Here's a recap of what we've been discussing so far. We've been talking about the behavior options that are available when you configure how your tabular web parts look. So let's take a look at one of these tabular web parts. There's several. There's the RtValues, RT time series, there's an RtTable web part. We're going to look at the RtValues right now. This particular RtValues web part, it's currently configured to use the configuration described or defined on this page right here. This is under RtTable. It's in the administrative or the RT web part admin page. So under RtTable, I have a configuration that I've named solution_values_config. This is like a template. I have defined this template to show the following things. Of the available columns, I'm showing the path name. Now that path name has a behavior called ad hoc trend. We'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. The descriptor is hidden. As you can see right here, that's the behavior for that. The time and the value are both default. And then everything else on here is hidden. Now what that means is when I apply that, that set of configuration, that template on here, we end up with something that looks like this. Now compare that. You see it's path, time, and value. And as you saw, the path has an ad hoc trend behavior. So when I click here, it generates an ad hoc trend. So that's the behavior I've defined for that. Now watch what happens if I go in and change this to, for example, instead of using solution_values, that template, I like calling them templates. We call them configurations officially. But instead of using that configuration, I can switch over to the default RT snapshot. When I apply that, you'll notice different look and feel. Now we're seeing this bar graph over here. So the idea is that you can configure these and then in one place, and then everybody around the organization can use it. Now we have looked at two behaviors so far, and we're going to take a look at some more behaviors. So the two behaviors we've looked at so far, when you're talking about this RtTable behavior options, we've looked at the RtTable link, which is simply a link to some website, internal or external. The second behavior we've looked at is the RtTable TagList, where when you click on a column, we will pass a list of tag names defined in module database. Now what I'd like to demonstrate right now is the this current state behavior. The current state behavior, what we do is we show, instead of in the column showing numbers, we actually show a bar graph where we show the 0 plus the span, and then we show the current value as a bar graph extending up or down from the typical value. So let me demonstrate. Right here, I will go back to my admin, the RT Web Parts admin page. And within there, under RtTable configuration, I can choose, as I said, this configuration right here. Let me make a change. Instead of showing just path name, time, and value, let me add the error descriptor. Here it is right here. Now error description is currently hidden, but what I'd like to do is set it to current state. And by setting this to current state, what we're doing, we're simply specifying that instead of showing the actual value of that attribute, we're going to show the current state of whichever we choose from this list here where we define the current state. Now what I'm going to show is the value, but as you can see there's other things that we could put in here, but for the demonstration here I'd like to simply describe that value using a bar graph. So there are other things that we could put here, things like average, min, max, etc. But in this case, so you have some flexibility there. In this case, we're simply going to show the value. So I'll go ahead and save this. Once I've saved that configuration, I can make use of it by going over here. I will select that as my configuration. And let's see if we see any caching issues here. I'll go ahead and apply. And when we choose apply, yeah, this hasn't refreshed yet. Let me go ahead and say OK. See if I can refresh the screen here. Yeah, see, we're not picking up, it's not picking up the new configuration. Let me go ahead and make sure that that is indeed saved. So we've got error description, current state, that looks good. And let's see again if it's still a caching issue. I think what I'm going to need to do is go in here and modify this. Now that I've refreshed all the screens, I'll reapply. Yeah, see, that's the default behavior. Let me reapply the one that I just modified. There we go. Okay, now what we're seeing, see, it's still labeled error description, but in fact what we're showing is the value, and the value is what I specified as part of that behavior configuration back here. Now, interestingly enough, if you haven't noticed this before, if you look at the default, this RT snapshot table behavior, if you look at the default snapshot behavior, that's in fact how the snapshot behavior shows that current state. If you notice, it's actually labeled current state, but in fact, we are making use of the error description column in order to do that. So that's why the default behavior, if you were to modify this and show the default configuration, it's going to show you that that same, there we go, that same bar, but it's going to be labeled current state. So that's how we do that.